Now the groundwater system is in balance, the full irrigation demands have been met, and we have enough water in storage to permit environmental flows to be restored. This is what we mean by system-wide reoptimization. What has been lost are the periodic unmanaged flood flows. What has been gained are managed flows, tailored to achieve targeted ecosystem benefits. Next, let's add hydropower to our multi-purpose dam and see how that affects our natural river system. Examples of such dams include the Aswan High Dam on the Nile River in Egypt, the Cahora Bassa Dam on the Zambezi in Mozambique, the Shaolangdi on the Yellow River in China, the Sardar Sarovar Dam in India, the El Cajon Dam in Honduras, and Shasta Dam in the Central Valley of California. Now, not all kinds of hydropower dams are of interest for this story. Let's contrast two situations. On the left, you see a reservoir with small storage capacity relative to the average annual inflow. In such cases, it is likely that the dam will operate more or less on a run-of-the-river basis. That means that water will be released into the turbines at roughly the same rate as the flow of water into the reservoir, so that the natural hydrograph is just passed through it and into the downstream channel, more or less unaltered. By definition, these dams do not need to be reoperated because they already release environmentally beneficial flows. In the frame on the right, by contrast, the hydropower reservoir has a large storage relative to the average annual inflow. In such cases, the dam will be operated to store much of the high flows and release them through the turbines gradually over the course of the dry season to make the power generation more or less uniform throughout the year. This, of course, eliminates the seasonal variability in flows that the ecosystem needs. These are the dams of interest to us for reoptimization. But the seasonal distortion is only part of the problem. Many hydropower dams are also operated on a daily cycle to generate power at times of peak demand, because they are easier to start up and close down than large coal or nuclear power stations. These demand peaks usually occur during the business day, and seasonally during the hot months when air conditioners are turned on. The daily ramping up and down particularly does great damage to the river as a living system, because it alternatively strands and then flushes the creatures or dewaters and then scours their habitat. That produces a lethal hydrograph, as seen here. Combining these distortions produces a hydrograph that looks like this, compared to the natural hydrograph. To counteract the seasonal distortions, the reoperation objective is to narrow the gaps between these hydrographs. That is to say, we want to move the hydropower dam in the direction of run-of-the-river operations. We do this by changing the schedule for generating power so that during the high runoff period, the dam generates more power than it does today, and during the low runoff period, it generates less power than it does today. That is feasible only if the other generators feeding into the same electrical grid, such as the additional hydropower and thermal power plants depicted here, also alter their schedules to make up the difference. It is important to notice that under the reoperation scenario, the total amount of power that will be generated by the dam on an annual basis remains the same as before. Indeed, the power output may actually increase because run-of-the-river reservoirs can be maintained at a higher average storage level, and higher water levels can drive generators with greater force, thus producing more power. In cases where there is a cascade of dams in the same river basin, or a complex of dams on several tributaries of that river, and all of these dams supply the same grid system, a coordinated reoperation strategy may be feasible. We first select one of these dams for environmental reoperation, and then also change the operations of the others to compensate. Now, the dam that we choose to reoperate should be the one that controls flows into an ecologically important floodplain, wetland system, delta, or estuary. That may not be the last dam in the series, as you can see from this illustration, where it is an upstream dam that really controls the flow pattern because it is so much larger. Now, let us change the operation of that target dam to a run-of-the-river mode. Notice how this flow pattern is preserved all the way into the ecologically important reach of the river downstream of the entire cascade. But notice how we can also change the scheduling of the power output from the upstream dams in the cascade so that the power output for the cascade as a whole remains the same. What is happening now is that the upper dams are providing the seasonal storage of water, and the target dam is releasing water at the same rate as it enters at the top of the cascade. Admittedly, this change in operations increases the flow distortions below the higher dams, which is generally undesirable. What has happened here is that we are trading off more distortion in the river reaches that are less ecologically important in order to get less distortion in the reach that is more ecologically important. These kinds of pragmatic trade-offs may sometimes be necessary to produce a net improvement in environmental conditions in a developed river system.
We can see from these examples that improving the environmental operations of dams often entails reoperating the entire water management system, for which the dam is just the storage component. These reoperations will not be cost-free, but the cost is not a reduction in the flood control, water supply, or hydropower benefits. The point of reoptimization is to keep these benefits intact. Rather, the costs are simply those associated with making the necessary water system improvements.
In the case of hydropower, the price tag is not an increase in the operating costs of the power generators. These will remain the same. Rather, the cost increase is for the construction of additional infrastructure. These are capital costs that may be necessary or desirable anyway to increase the reliability of the system as a whole. Run-of-the-river operations at the dam will require 3 types of new investments in power generation and transmission. First, it may be necessary to install additional penstocks and turbines at the dam to allow larger releases of water through the powerhouse, and it may also be necessary to increase or enlarge the release works at the dam. Second, additional transmission capacity may need to be installed to move that power. Third, additional generators, probably gas or oil turbines, may need to be installed to supply additional power during the dry season. All of this will increase the costs of providing power. Notably, this increase in capacity will not increase the amount of fossil fuels used or increase greenhouse gas emissions. Irrigation reoptimization may require the construction and operation of new wells and efficiency improvements on the farms. Flood control reoptimization may incur the cost of relocating structures or setting back levees. Of course, reoperation also provides large benefits. That is why we are interested in learning how to do it. Reoperation will enable reservoirs to capture and hold more water than they do today. If the reservoir supplies irrigation or municipal water, that will allow it to carry over more water to buffer periods of drought. The reservoir will also be better able to deal with the larger flood pulses because structures in the downstream floodplain have been moved out of harm's way. These benefits alone may well justify the reoperation costs, quite apart from the substantial environmental benefits.
And there is yet another potential benefit that will loom larger in a world where climate change is likely to significantly alter precipitation patterns. As you will see, the reservoir reoperation techniques we have described are likely to substantially buffer the effects of global climate change.
Especially in arid regions of the world, the effect on hydrology will be to make the extreme events more extreme. That means that the droughts will become more profound and last longer, and the floods will become more severe and frequent. Snowmelt will occur earlier and faster. The rivers will become flashier.
The conventional engineering response is to build more dams, but a faster and cheaper alternative in many cases is to make use of the natural storage capacity that many developed river systems already possess in their aquifers and floodplains. As we have seen, these management techniques have the major advantage of restoring damaged river environments rather than further impairing them. We have just been through a quick overview of just some of the types of reoperation techniques that can be widely applied to allow major dams to be reoperated, to restore downstream ecosystems and human livelihoods. But where do we go from here to accomplish those objectives?
By applying such models in a variety of settings all over the world, and then developing and demonstrating reoperation plans for the most promising dams, we can learn together the suite of tools and techniques for successfully reoptimizing river infrastructure and transform how rivers are managed at the global scale. But our goals are even more ambitious. We are poised on the brink of a new era of dam building, particularly in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. By learning how existing dams can be reoperated, we can also illuminate how the next generation of dams